Good morning. Welcome to the National Press Club, where news happens. I'm Zach Cohen, Secretary of the National Press Club, a senior reporter at Bloomberg Industry Group, and in the interest of full disclosure for this conversation, the chair of the Guild at Bloomberg Industry Group, which is an affiliate of the AFL-CIO. In February, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics released data showing union representation grew by 463,000 in 2025. The AFL-CIO has interpreted this as U.S. workers looking to the labor movement for solutions as artificial intelligence threatens their jobs. Over the past 3 years, union favorability has been even higher. It's at a high for the last half century, according to Gallup. Since 2022, however, job postings for occupations that involve lots of structured and repetitive tasks have decreased by 13%, according to the Harvard Business Review, while employer demand for jobs that require more analytical, technical, or creative work grew by 20%. AI automation will continue to disrupt the job market and displace workers in the coming years. Today, we are glad to host AFL-CIO President Liz Shuler to address artificial intelligence impact on the American workforce. President Shuler.
Thank you. It's a tiny little stage. Be careful. Be careful on stage. We don't want to have any OSHA violations up here. Well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. And it is so good to see you. It's great to be back at the National Press Club. And I want to thank Mark and Steve, of course, the entire leadership team, and every member of the National Press Club. It's a storied institution, and it's an honor to be here to speak this morning. And I want to thank you for the work that you do every day. It's more important than ever. I also want to thank Zach, because obviously for your role here today, but also for your leadership in the union. And I'm excited to be with you in discussion in a few minutes. I also want to say, in the wake of what we saw on Saturday night, as we as a country grapple with how polarized the nation is politically, we're seeing more and more political violence, especially against our journalists, who have been detained, assaulted, threatened at rates we've never seen in these past few years. America's workers know it is essential that we have a press that is free, that is protected, and speaks truth to power. That's right. Because that's what we strive to do every day in the labor movement. We stand in solidarity with you as you do that critical work on the front lines. So thank you. So we're here this morning. It is a sacred day for our labor movement and for our country. It's Workers' Memorial Day. Every year on April 28th, we come together to recognize every worker in the history of this country who has been killed or injured on the job. In 2024, the most recent year we have full data for, our estimates show that 7.5 million workers were injured or hurt on the job in the private sector, and 5,070 workers were killed on the job. Those numbers are unconscionable. We grieve for each of them. We bring their families close as they deal with the loss of a father, a mother, a sibling, a child. But more than anything, we remind ourselves the single best way to honor those workers is to build a future where things are better, where every worker in this country has safety on the job. Every worker knows their rights and that their rights are protected, feels confident that they have a good future ahead of them. And so I can't think of a more fitting day to talk about AI, the single biggest threat to working people of our lifetime if we don't harness it properly, because it also has inherent safety risks. And I want to tell you a story I heard a few weeks ago from an Amazon warehouse worker named Isaiah in Bessemer, Alabama. On Isaiah's first day, they told him to go to what they call the daily stand-up, where you get your shift assignments, and his boss handed him what they told him was a scanner, just to literally scan the packages that he's helping to ship out. And what he did not know then, and what his boss never told him, was that that scanner was tracking every single move he made and reporting it back to management. How many steps he took in a day, how long it took him to get from his station to the bathroom, how long he was in the bathroom. It's called time off task. Have you heard about this? And if it's more than 5 minutes, it triggers an alert and you can be disciplined or fired. Often by an app, by the way. And heaven forbid if you were standing too close to a coworker, because based on their GPS, you might be talking to each other trying to unionize, right? This is this surveillance that's happening. Then one day, one of Isaiah's coworkers said, "I'm not feeling so great. I've been hauling heavy boxes around this warehouse for upwards of 10 hours. Is there something else I can do? Because I'm not feeling well." And the manager said, "Well, let me run that up the system." Here's what he meant by that. He plugged what the worker said into an algorithm that spit out an answer that the manager was supposed to give. And that answer was, you either do the same job today or you're fired. So keep in mind, this is Bessemer, Alabama, a city with more than double the national poverty rate. And so you can imagine the pressure that that worker felt to say, okay, I'm gonna suck it up, I'm gonna get back out there so that I can hang on to this job and support my family. Well, that worker died on the job near the end of his shift because there wasn't a human being to deliver some common sense in a moment that called for it. And as he laid there, the Amazon managers figured out, when they were trying to figure out what to do, they told Isaiah and his coworkers to keep working around the body. And all of those workers, desperate to keep their jobs, afraid of that time off task algorithm, kept going as that worker laid there on the ground. And that has happened actually since that incident in Bessemer happened in my home state of Oregon, not that long ago. And 100 years ago, worker safety meant not getting your hand chopped off at the job. Worker safety was workers at the union I come from, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, dying by the day as they put up the power lines that electrified America. Today, it's workers being surveilled, fired, hurt, even killed by companies that use AI without guardrails. And in a case, in that story that I just told you a moment ago, if you think that was some isolated incident, some one-off issue that Amazon has now corrected, as I said, it just happened again at another Amazon warehouse in Hillsboro, Oregon 2 weeks ago. And I can tell you from traveling this country, talking to workers on the front lines, this is not about workers being anti-technology. We are not anti-technology. We are not anti-innovation. There are so many workers in our movement who are excited to use AI, who are already finding ways to help them do their jobs better. What we are is anti-greed. We are against these forces that are being used, that are using technology without our input, without our control, and at great risk to our jobs and our own lives, the way they were at those Amazon warehouses. So that is what we are seeing far too much of these days in workplaces and on job sites all over the country. And I am here today to sound the alarm. For way too long now, this conversation about the future of work has centered around the vision of a half a dozen big tech billionaires. They go on CNBC or they're in Davos, right? They lay out their plans for an AI future of their ideas who should win, their ideas of who should lose in this new economy. What they say is treated like gospel, like it's the only point of view that could possibly matter. And what has been missing, conveniently, from those conversations, what has always been missing, is the view and the voice of people who actually do the work, who interact with these technologies every day on our jobs, who are gonna have our lives and our futures shaped by these technologies. Where is our voice? It is absolutely missing from this conversation. Now, we at the AFL-CIO have been in this space for a better part of a decade now. Back in 2017, we put together a commission on the future of work, which led to the launch of our Technology Institute. And Lauren McFerrin is here in the audience somewhere, yeah, who we're so proud to have run the Technology Institute. We have built our own expertise now in the labor movement, shaped collective bargaining strategies, gotten our arms around the change that we knew was coming. And a few weeks ago, so much of that work came together in our Workers First AI Summit. I don't know if anyone here was there, but it was an amazing gathering of labor leaders, of course, industry, academics, coalition partners, allies, faith community. And the word that came up over and over again in that room that every single speaker touched on was urgency. Urgency. This is not, contrary to what some may tell you, this is not a 2028 issue. Everyone's thinking, oh, this is going to be what's going to fuel the presidential in 2028. No, this is a right now issue. It's something working people are thinking about every single day as they think about their futures, their families, their lives that their kids will have. And today, I'm going to share some fascinating data that speaks exactly to what workers are experiencing. For the past 4 months, we've been working on the most in-depth study we have ever fielded into workers' feelings on AI. What's happening at their jobs, how strongly they feel about safety and data protections, the policies that they're demanding in this moment. Our research team has been running focus groups, going on listening tours in communities all across the country. We have now combined those sessions with a new survey where we talked to more than 1,200 workers, understanding how they're feeling about AI on the job. And we're going to put the full research out next Tuesday, so we're just doing a little preview today, a week ahead of time. But our top lines came in literally yesterday. So I thought I would give you a preview this morning. There is a very, very clear story in this research. About half of workers say that their employers are using AI. Some told us, I'm scared, I'm anxious, I don't know what this means for my job down the line. Others are more neutral. But I'll tell you what unites workers in this country right now, and here's some numbers. 95% say a human being, not a machine, should make the final call on hiring, firing, and how much they get paid. 95%. I see a lot of heads nodding in the audience. 92% want transparency and accountability when employers use AI. And I want to pause on those numbers for just a second, because have we heard those numbers around anything else in this country, especially right now? But those are universal background check territory. Those are Medicare prescription drug regulation or negotiation territory. So this is an overwhelming consensus, and I will tell you it's across party lines, okay? And I want to share with you what I think is the most telling statistic that we found out in this survey. 94% of workers say that they should know if AI is being used to monitor them. Yet, only 7% say my employer has disclosed this to me if they're monitoring them with AI. That is a 10-to-1 gap in what working people in this country expect and what employers are telling them. And that's employers across pretty much any industry. This is not just in tech, right? This is across every major industry in America, what they are doing to millions of workers. And what they are doing is exactly what Amazon was doing to Isaiah. So we have a vast majority of American workers who share the same views on how we move forward. The next question is, How do we get there? Who do we trust to fight for those policies and deliver that kind of change? And on that question, we heard in the survey, there is only one force in this country that working people trust to do that. They do not trust Democrats. They do not trust Republicans. They sure as hell do not trust big tech or their employers, all of which are polling underwater. The institution that workers trust more than any other in this country to fight for them right now on AI, by far, is, drumroll, the labor movement. I think you knew that. We are the only force in this country with net positive trust across the board, regardless of the political party people belong to. And when it comes to independence, because we know more and more people are identifying as independent, right? Those swing voters who say they are disaffected, who aren't listening to anyone. The same voters who are going to decide these midterms and 2028 as well, they are more than 5 times more likely to trust the labor movement than a political party. We are that trusted voice right now when it comes to the policy and the politics. Right? And if you look around DC today, you see exactly why. We have a Congress and an administration that has found the time to shut this city down and roll out a red carpet for a literal king, but can't do the thing that 9 in 10 workers want them to do and pass common sense AI guardrails. We are sick and tired of the inaction. And if our leaders aren't going to do it, we are going to stand together and fight for it ourselves, because we do not have a day to waste. And last year, a nurse in Nevada named Adam had an elderly woman come in with a dangerously low blood pressure. And the hospital's AI system flagged her for sepsis, life-threatening. The AI system said, immediate IV fluids. Until Adam noticed a dialysis catheter on her collarbone, which meant that flooding her with fluids could kill her. Adam brought it up. The charge nurse said, no, we need to follow the official AI protocol. And thank God Adam made the decision he did in that moment to stand up and refuse to do it, used his professional judgment. And a doctor was brought in who agreed with Adam. And so he saved that woman's life. That's an extreme example, but so many of us have been in situations like that before where the technology does not match our lived experience. We have bartenders at casinos in Vegas where the bosses have said, we don't need you anymore. We can just have a robot make the drinks, with no sense if that customer has had one too many and needs to be cut off. Professional athletes who are making split decisions constantly on the field, whether to pass left, pass right, on a soccer field. Now, those athletes are being questioned by a coach listening to an AI evaluation of the decisions they made on a field. Journalists who are seeing their life's work, pieces they've worked on for weeks, edited by AI so that it might have better appeal, quote unquote, to certain audiences and sell more ad revenue. There is no worker, no industry this does not touch. Every job is now a technology job, period. We are at the most important fork in the road our economy has faced in the last 100 years. Last month, one of the big banks put out their latest projections on AI and the economy. And this bank said, on the conservative side, 7% of workers displaced by AI at this current pace over the next few years. That's conservative. We have about 163 million workers in America. Does anyone want to do some back-of-the-envelope math for me on what 7% is of 163 million workers? A lot. Yeah, that's 12 million Americans, a group of people the size of Pennsylvania losing their jobs. Does anyone think that that calls for business as usual? Are we going to sit around and just let that happen? I doubt that's going to create any stability in our economy, and that is what we need right now. Does anyone want to continue in this race to the bottom that we're in right now? Where workers are being fired, discriminated against, surveilled without our consent. Where this handful of billionaires, one soon to be a trillionaire, get to play God with our economy and our lives. Hell no. Say it with me, hell no. We know we can do better. We know we can do better. And we know in the labor movement, because workers have done better every single time in this country's history. We've dealt with changes in technology since our inception. The so-called industrial revolutions that have transformed our economy literally launched our labor movement at the turn of the century. And we've evolved every single time. The steam engine, that first industrial revolution, right? Where we went from, the steam engine, we went from farming to factories. Textile workers and auto workers came together to fight for the 8-hour day. The electrification of America, as I mentioned earlier. The digital age with computers, when office workers adopted to this technology, adapted and innovated. Every time we have made these technologies better. It's workers who have made these technologies better and safer and made them work for all of us. And now in this AI revolution, we're going to do it again. Labor is going to lead again. And as I said, we've made AI and the future of work a priority for the better part of a decade now. And over the past few years, we've had some of the biggest contract wins in our history. Our labor unions out in Hollywood, SAG-AFTRA, Writers Guild, IATSE, all putting AI front and center in their latest contracts and winning groundbreaking protections. Those casino workers and bartenders I told you about, part of Unite Here, who represents folks in this very building, packed a literal basketball stadium in Las Vegas twice, threatening to strike over AI, and won some of the strongest protections we have ever seen. And journalists at Politico, part of our CWA family, who won a historic victory against AI misuse. When management tried to roll it out without their consent or knowledge, it directly violated their contract, and they took it to arbitration and won. Right? Yeah. Sure. Thank you, News Guild. But this moment demands even more, which is why late last year, we put forward the first ever Workers First AI agenda. And it's a clear set of policy principles, and you can find them on our website. These principles say some pretty, I think, common sense things that we can all agree on. No, you can't surveil us in the bathroom. Are you for it? Okay. Yeah, he clapped. No, you cannot steal our data without our consent. No, you're not going to discriminate against us or fire us by app because a machine told you to. An agenda that gives workers a voice at the table, shaping technology in every workplace, classrooms, factories, airports, social security offices, film sets, everywhere. An agenda that demands training for workers, especially young people, to be prepared for AI on the job, and helps our educators teach those skills in our schools. An agenda that protects our civil rights, so we're all treated equally and fairly by these technologies. and make sure that our most basic right as workers to organize and stand together in a union is strengthened for every worker in this country. So these are not just principles on a piece of paper, folks. They are a mandate to deliver a vision for people, a future that is human-made. Every single principle laid out in that agenda polls between 75 and 96% among voters. And Democrats, Republicans, and independents are within a handful of points on every single one of them. Labor is going to use every lever at our disposal to bring those principles to life right now. So you're going to see these demands in our contracts, as I spoke about earlier. You're going to see us shaping state-level policy, where our local leaders are fighting for laws like the FAIR Act in Massachusetts and No Robo-Bosses Act in California, protecting workers from AI discrimination and stopping machines from having the final say in hiring and firing decisions. You're going to see unconventional partnerships that we form with companies like Microsoft, who have said, yes, we recognize it's better for business and labor when workers actually have a seat at the table and can actually influence how these technologies are developed so that they're working for all of us. But I want to tell the journalists here today that you will feel this in every bit of our political work on the ground in the run-up to these midterms and beyond. We are the movement that is banging the drum. We always, of course, every election are the ones sounding the alarms. We were the ones, by the way, who sounded the alarms on affordability decades ago. And so we're taking full credit that the politicians in this country are starting to talk about the cost of groceries, rent being too damn high, and everything in people's lives getting more and more expensive, which, you know, I think the political folk are starting to wake up to, and they're talking about it. And that's exactly what we're going to do on AI. Not just for 2028, but today and every day until these midterms. There are big tech PACs, have you heard about them? Raising hundreds of millions of dollars to spend against candidates to basically put a stop to any kind of regulation on AI. They want their deregulation agenda at all costs. They're going to learn exactly what Elon Musk has learned so many times these past few years. You cannot buy a movement. So we are year-round organizers in the labor movement. This is what we do. Working people on the ground, talking to each other, being those trusted voices for family and friends and coworkers and our kids. We're out in swing states right now, earlier than we ever have been before, rallying folks, connecting with them, long before Election Day, building those relationships. Because that's what's going to make a difference, is this ground game, right? People talking to each other. And we're going to take this research and make sure it is spread far and wide across our coalition so that everyone knows what workers are demanding. So every 2 weeks between now and our convention in June, we'll be putting out new updates on AI, new research, new ways for workers to get involved. And at our convention in Minneapolis, we're going to be rolling out a massive campaign to keep that drumbeat going far beyond convention. And when it does come to 2028, where we know the shadow primary is already underway, don't we? We'll be seeing candidate announcements early next year. Let me just say this. For any candidate who wants the support of our unions, who claims to be the champion of working people, like that governor out there in California, this is your moment to tell us which side you are on. You can't say that you're for common sense legislation and then veto it because the big tech CEOs write campaign checks and tell you not to. You're either with workers in this country or you're with the billionaires and big tech. Those Amazon tragedies that I started with this morning, the stories of how workers are experiencing technologies in their workplace right now, they've come from good journalists like those in this room. So again, thank you. Thank you for the work you do. And I'll tell you, when I read these stories and I talk to those workers myself, the same common theme always comes up. They tried to divide us. They tried to isolate us. They tried to make us feel like our voice didn't matter, that we were powerless. And what these companies have done, in fact, is the exact opposite. They've united workers all over this country. They've made workers wake up to their power, to what is possible in a union. And at our last convention, we set a goal to add 1 million new members to this movement over the next decade. Instead, we did it in 2 years. And as you heard this morning, nearly 500,000 workers last year alone joined a union. And we have more workers in this country now covered by a union contract than we have in the last 16 years. We're damn proud of that. That tells you labor's on the rise. We have the power, and we're going to use every bit of that power to build a future that works for all of us. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you so much. That was really fascinating.
All right.
I have a couple of follow-up questions,
Of course.
as you can imagine. I detected a tone of optimism, which surprised me a bit at this time of sort of national economic and political pessimism that you all can move this agenda forward. The polling that you've revealed here today, I appreciate you making a little bit of news with that.
Yeah.
Does that give you, do you need more than that to sort of build on that political mandate going into these midterm elections?
I think we have no choice but to strike an optimistic tone because we have a very short window to organize in, to build the coalition that's needed to get the guardrails and protections we need for workers in this AI future. And I think there's a lot of scare tactics out there. People are talking about a very dystopian future where, you know, work as we know it is going away. We believe in work. We think work is important. We think people identify with, you know, their purpose in life is built around what we do and how we advance this, this country forward. And so we think that, you know, being optimistic, showing people that they do have power, that they can come together collectively and fight back in ways that they didn't think possible alone is exactly what's needed right now. And it's the foundation of the labor movement. That's what we do, collective action, collective bargaining, collective mobilization to make change, and it's no different with AI.
I was fascinated by, in preparation for this, I noticed some of the same polling that you had been looking at. I did not realize that union favorability is up to as high as it's been since 1916. It's been on the rise since 2000, and is across the board, as you mentioned, in the political spectrum. At the same time, those same respondents are generally supportive of right-to-work laws that your union has said that are a threat to the labor movement. How do you communicate to those folks who you're going to need in your corner if you're going to get some of these guardrails?
Yeah, that right to work mantra is so frustrating because they had a lock on, I think, a phrase that sounds very powerful, but it could not mean, you know, something more destructive to workers. We often say, you know, not right to work, it's right to starve. Because preventing workers from coming together collectively and negotiating their fair share is a race to the bottom. And we've seen that now in states all across this country. When you compare right-to-work states and non-right-to-work states economically, workers obviously have they fare much better. So yeah, the interesting thing I found in the polling was this notion of crossing party lines. And you know, people see the labor movement out there fighting for them. We're not just fighting for Democrats, we're fighting for everybody, right? We're not just fighting for Republicans or independents or Green Party. It's about work and about fairness and what you deserve. And so that, I believe, is what's fueling these numbers, that we are at historic highs, as you said. I wish more people knew about it. As you said, you just sort of, you know, doing your research. How do we break through? How do we get that message out there more widely, because when people see what's happening out there, they often feel very isolated. And so when they see unions out there on the front lines on a strike line, out in Hollywood with SAG-AFTRA, that got a lot of attention, and people said, wow, okay, the actors are, first of all, in a union, who knew? And secondly, they're fighting to actually preserve their creative work and get paid what they're owed for the work that they do. I like that concept. That's for me. And so I think that's what's really, has drawn a lot of attention to the labor movement in recent years. And I think it's only going to grow because, again, as technology is invading our workplaces, people know in their guts that something is off. And the more people feel that isolation and that sense of hopelessness, the more they're looking for movements that they can join to actually make a difference.
In this two-party system, how do you go about building a governing coalition in Congress? You had mentioned that there's some skepticism, both of Democrats and Republicans, that would be able to push the policies that you all are hoping to get implemented in the next couple of years here.
It is difficult. Let's not kid ourselves. We are extremely polarized, and nowhere is that more on display than Capitol Hill. And people in Congress tend to focus on their next election versus what's good for working people. And so there is a real void in terms of how we bring common sense back to, policy making and in our elections. And so I think we'll see in 2026 a continuation of folks who are really tired and feeling disenfranchised by that polarization. And so we say in the labor movement, we are the place that brings people together. And so we can play a real leadership role in showing people that the issues that we care about aren't partisan. They're actually about people and about us succeeding in our lives and being able to provide for our families. And so, I think we have the secret sauce when it comes to how to communicate to people, but only when we can empower people on the ground is how we'll break through in these elections, and for members of Congress to actually see that this lack of an action, this polarization where you're not getting anything done, only leads to people getting more and more angry and frustrated, and seeking other ways to find relief. And obviously we've seen that in the last few elections, but I'll tell you, our strategy is we're going to the states. If Congress is stymied, we're going to make progress at the state level. And so what we're doing is educating and empowering our state AFL-CIO leadership to be on the front lines of those proactive pieces of legislation that we can introduce in a state legislature, and use that as a rallying tool. Use it as a way to educate people and use it as a way to make progress.
I'm glad you bring this up. We have a question from Baltimore Councilman Jermaine Jones, who I believe is in the audience today. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Who asked, as cities increasingly adopt AI in public services and procurement, what standards should or can local governments put in place to ensure these technologies protect workers, build both municipal employees and contracted workers, rather than displacing or degrading job quality?
It is such a good question, and I think procurement is one of these issues that kind of travels below the surface that not many people know about unless you're inside government, and yet it has the power to actually cause great harm, not only to jobs and displacing workers, but think about data privacy. Look at the Social Security data that went during Doge when Elon Musk brought in, a team of tech folk, basically launched, started using AI tools with no guardrails. And then now, our data, our privacy, all of that information is being warehoused somewhere, and who knows what they're doing with it, and who knows if it'll ultimately be monetized. Because that's another big aspect of this debate, is what is happening with that data, and how do we as workers both give our permission and have the ability to control how it's used, but also if it's making money for corporations and they're getting insights based off the work that we do, then we should actually have a seat at that table and benefit from it as well. So procurement, I think, is going to be a big issue that you're going to see nationally, state level, local level, that we need to pass guardrail legislation around to make sure that there isn't just unregulated, unleashed use of AI without transparency and without protections from liability and some accountability. Because, if companies are inside doing this work and there's nobody watching or holding them accountable, then that's going to harm the public. Yeah.
How do you convince these businesses that the guardrails on AI that you all are pursuing is in their long-term business interest, right? At the end of the day, shareholders are often a critical force in that decision-making process.
Yeah.
How does that factor into your arguments to them? Is that even part of the audience?
Yeah, and in unionized workplaces, we do have a seat at the table. Mm-hmm. We can actually show how bringing workers in on the front end benefits them because it's productivity, loss or gain. It's also, investing in expensive equipment often that may or may not work, because if you're not working with workers on the front end to have the proper training, to have their insights, they're the ones who know how to do their jobs the best. And so if you're bringing technology in, who better to talk to than the person who's actually doing the job? Now, in a unionized environment, we have the ability to use our contract negotiations to influence that process. If you don't have a union in your workplace, often it comes in with, no notice. Workers are not only displaced, but then their jobs are actually kind of dumbed down and degraded. We've seen in instances like McDonald's, for example, where they bring technology in and it actually crashes and burns because they had so many unanticipated consequences of how the technology was being used, effectively or not. They end up ripping out the technology because it's a failed experiment. And working alongside your workforce actually could have saved you money and made the experience better for customers and actually benefited workers. Because I want to make sure people realize we are not anti-technology. The labor movement knows that technology is here to stay. We want technology to enhance our jobs, to make our jobs safer and better, not just degrade and dehumanize us. And all in the pursuit of the almighty dollar, because often, as we know, this is an efficiency thing that companies think they're going to make money off of, when in fact, it should be about augmenting humans and how we do our work, again, in a safer way and a better way, so that everyone wins.
You were talking about various ways unions could push for this at the bargaining table. A question from Tim Ryan from Law 360. What is the role of legislation to sort of fill the gap that you can't do in a CBA?
It's interesting, we have so much potential with legislation, but no one has the will. And so we've actually used collective bargaining to fill the gap. So it's, in my mind, it's been the reverse, because we know that most of the legislation's either been killed, or the feds and President Trump and his policies have prevented or tried to, the moratorium on state-level legislation that they've been driving. And so what we've been saying is no, state-level legislation is essential, because who knows better than the folks who are on the ground to know what a state or a local government needs, or what a community needs. And so, for example, the No Robo-Bosses Act I mentioned earlier, we've seen in workplaces all across this country, and especially at the state level, where workers are getting fired by an app, and there's no human intervention. Can you imagine if something bad data goes in, gets fed, it kind of feeds on itself, and then before you know it, you're out of your job, and you have no recourse. So to be able to have human intervention is essential. And so to pass a law that says, no, you can't do that just by machine, you have to have human oversight. We've empowered our state and local leaders to run legislation to that effect in places like California and Massachusetts, and I mentioned it in the speech. So I absolutely think that legislation is the key to this, and that any kind of intervention at the federal level to prevent that from happening, like we saw the legislation in Congress, we were able to defeat 95-1 or 99-1 or something because people saw this was a big power grab by the tech billionaires, right? Of course, they don't want to have any guardrails on this technology. So I think that, again, an example of bipartisanship where people came together and said, no, we're not going to allow this to happen.
Who do you see as your key allies in Congress on AI?
Well, there's actually, I would say, a void in both parties on this. We don't feel like we have real strong champions, but there's, I think, some bills that we've seen introduced that we've supported by a number of, different senators, mainly Democrats, who have stepped forward. Senator Markey, I know, has some powerful legislation. Senator Casey from Pennsylvania. I know Mark Kelly has been sounding the alarms quite a lot on this. And in fact, use the AFL-CIO AI principles as a baseline for what those demands could look like in Congress. So we're proud of that. We work with anyone, no matter what party you're from, to make these demands. And so we'd like to see more workers at the table when it comes to members of Congress and figuring out what needs to be done, because we need a federal approach to protect us from the harms that unregulated AI presents, but also to plan for our future. Because how are we going to prepare the workforce? How are we going to train people and make sure that, if technology starts displacing people, where are they going to go? What kind of safety net do we have in this country? We don't. Right now, we count on employers, basically, to do that in a scattershot way. And so how will we advance what this country needs if we don't come together in a bipartisan way in Congress and at the state level?
And I think I saw a letter recently from Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, a Republican from Pennsylvania, with Senator Kelly, supporting some of these AI principles, to your point. Former Labor Secretary Lori Chavez-DeRemer had a pretty pro-labor record in Congress, if I remember correctly. Does her ouster, does it hurt your cause at all? Was she an ally in any of this?
Well, when she was a congresswoman, she was supportive of the PRO Act, for example. For those who don't know the PRO Act, it's a comprehensive labor law reform piece of legislation we've been fighting for years. And she was a PRO Act Republican in Congress. And of course, then we were very disappointed to see during her confirmation hearing that she reversed course on her positioning on that piece of legislation. So we've been saying that we need a labor secretary who should be out in front in terms of AI protections for workers. And what we've seen so far is a tilt more toward, the tech leadership who is essentially was lined up at the inauguration, who is now, leading the charge on the policies of this federal government. So we have an opportunity to influence that, we hope, as we look to our next labor secretary to say, this is a crisis, this is an urgent demand that workers have. The polling suggests, and you heard the numbers, that there's no disagreement here. So no matter who you are and what party you belong to, listen to your workers.
I think Acting Secretary Keith Sonderling, when he was at the EEOC, had made some comments that were in favor of some of the civil rights protections that you all have been advocating for when it comes to AI. Is he somebody that you think you could work with?
I look forward to speaking with him about this, yes.
Something on the books that you want to tell us is coming up, or?
Nothing inked, but yes, it's definitely on the radar. And I think, no matter who the Secretary of Labor is, should have a relationship with the AFL-CIO, because we represent 65 unions, nearly 15 million working people. I think it's in your best interest to know, if you want to know it's the finger on the pulse of the worker, talk to us. But I think the opportunity here is in, again, the consensus, right? We know that this is something that workers care about, and it's only going to grow because more and more people are experiencing it right now in their workplaces.
One question we got was, will the AFL-CIO create an AI governance rating system for political candidates?
Ooh, a litmus test. I like it. We've been known to do that, and we absolutely will make this. We've already included it on our candidate questionnaire for people running for office, and so we're going to hold their feet to the fire. And as I said, we don't care if you're Gavin Newsom or Donald Trump, right? Anything in between, we are holding you accountable on who you stand with in this fight, workers or big money.
A question from Jamie Bailey Magnum, excuse me if I mispronounced that, an independent journalist. Black women's unemployment peaked at 7.3% at the end of 2025. Federal job cuts alone cost Black women nearly 95,000 jobs last year. The federal government was historically been a pathway to the middle class. What is the AFL-CIO doing specifically to protect and rebuild that pathway in the wake of AI usage and development?
Good question, and the largest and most significant union-busting act in our history occurred under this administration when Donald Trump canceled the union contracts of nearly 1 million federal workers. And I agree that Black women were the ones who were disproportionately affected by that because those federal jobs were a pathway to the middle class. And so we went to work right away. We said all along that we are going to fight this with every fiber of our being, and we're doing it in the courts, we're doing it in Congress, and we're doing it in our communities and on the streets. And so those lawsuits that we filed, some of which we've won, by the way, were designed to slow this down. And so that was a deliberate strategy. Our work in the Congress, of course, to restore collective bargaining with the Protect America's Workforce Act, which we got a bipartisan majority for, and it passed the House of Representatives. And so we're going to keep building on that and restore collective bargaining rights for federal workers. But in terms of AI, once again, we are going to see the disproportionate effects. You talked about the violations of civil rights and discrimination. These AI systems in hiring are blatantly discriminatory. We've seen it. We have data on it. What are we going to do about it? We have to pass the guardrails, the protections, again, at I think the state and local level, to make sure that these systems aren't used to discriminate against us. And so the bias that is inherent in a lot of these systems is because the folk in Silicon Valley who are developing them don't have working people in the labs, don't have real world experience as far as how these technologies get used in a workplace. And so we've been saying all along, we need a seat at the table. We need to get in those labs and make sure that working people, for example, when you're driving a bus, you're dealing with things that don't happen in a simulated environment, right? You have folks who are, coming on the bus who have, mental health issues, who often we see bus drivers who are protecting passengers from violence, they're inserting themselves. And so these kinds of scenarios are never anticipated in a lab. So we want to make sure that a worker perspective is included upstream in the development process, not just after technology is developed and then landed in a workplace.
Yeah. I'm going to build on a question from one of our members and one of my colleagues at Bloomberg News, Mike Shepard. You have members of your union that are calling for a moratorium on data center construction that are powering these large language models. At the same time, you've got building trades who, plumbers, electricians who stand to get good paying jobs out of these construction. How do you balance that as president of the AFL-CIO?
Very carefully, yes. No, and I think it's being presented as a false choice because often the debate tries to pit workers in the environment against each other or workers and community against each other, when in fact we can have both the policies that benefit both. And so we are demanding, yes, that data center construction be with good union jobs, because we also don't want those jobs to be crappy, low-road jobs. So we want labor standards and protections. But we also know that communities need to be protected. And so we as a labor movement are standing up for the transparency protections to make sure that communities aren't left with paying the bill, footing the bill for higher electricity costs or water usage. So we want to make sure that those protections are built into any legislation or the regulations that we are fighting for. We want to make sure that people are able to access those jobs, right? That communities can benefit from economic development. So we think that both can be done, and the labor movement's fighting to make sure that these stay connected, that workers aren't pit against each other, and that we're moving together with community and with workers so that everyone benefits.
I have one more question, but before I get to that, I want to take a moment to thank our headliners who helped, headliners committee that helped organize today's conversation, as well as Club Executive Director Didier Saji and all the club staff for making this event possible. Thank you to our audience for being here today. We hope you will join us at our next Headliners event on Thursday, where our former First Lady of Iceland, Eliza Reid, will discuss her memoir, The First Lady Next Door, a memoir of Iceland, identity, and unexpected adventure. Sounds like fun. I do want to present you with our highly coveted and sought after National Press Club mug as a token of our gratitude for you being here today. Before you go, I do want to ask you, we obviously have many journalists and communicators in the room, members of the club. The Harvard Business Review, probably no surprise to any of us here, found that these are the types of roles that are most likely to be automated and be threatened by AI. How should our members prepare, and what should our members be preparing for as this technology continues to evolve?
Well, I just want to thank you again, and I did so in my remarks, but just the courage that you've shown, how you speak truth to power is absolutely essential in this moment especially, and there's so many examples of it. We are grateful. But I'm going to say something that's probably very predictable, but I would say the more you can lean into your union, and for those who have not yet formed unions in your newsrooms, please do so, because I think we've found that that is the single most effective tool in fighting back against AI encroachment in your work, and to have some power to be able to stand up and make demands and, as Zach knows, enforce the contract, because we negotiate these incredibly strong protections. I referenced the Politico example, where if you have it in your contract, if you're not able to enforce it, it's meaningless. And so that arbitration win that the News Guild had was just heard around the world, right? And I think that, to me, shows the power of what we can do when we stand up together. And so I just say, keep leaning in, keep organizing, keep mobilizing, keep educating, because we have a huge job to do. The public, I think, is still largely unaware of what these technologies are doing and what the potential is for harm. And so the role that journalists play in making sure that people understand that, recognize it, and know what they can do to stand up and fight back is what's going to be essential. So the job you do is just absolutely crucial and incredible. And so let's just form more unions. And then also, I think we're ready, as I alluded to launch a massive mobilization, frankly, across this country. And we think the labor movement can be a place, a center of gravity for community orgs, allies, partners, to come together and mount the fight back. Because we're seeing a lot of anxiety, and I think people don't know what to do, right? And they feel like they are powerless and disconnected. Well, let's join the labor movement and this huge coalition we're gonna build to make sure that we have the power to shape this technology for people. This isn't about winning against China. This isn't about making a bunch of billionaires richer. This is about making sure technology benefits people. So I think we do that together.
President Shuler, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.